So yeah, then we got into the orders he actually signed. So one of the first things he did was eliminate DEI programming. We won't get too far into this. I'll do some writing up on it. They did, interestingly enough, send out an email. I don't know if you saw this week. They sent out an email to government employees saying, if you know of an employee whose job title has switched since we put everyone on leave, make sure you tell us. So they sent out a snitch email. Yeah, so that was a thing. All of the DEI deemed employees are currently on federal paid leave. Trump gave them paid leave. Well, they figure out a way to lay them off. So that was the thing. Trump signed an order to leave the WHO. Rio, I know you researched this week, so tell us about this crap.
Yes, I did, because I also wrote a paper on why this is a really bad idea in a different context, but yeah. So he cited the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and lack of reform and undue political influence as his reasons for leaving the WHO. And really, this is just kind of a dumb choice, because he's saying that America pays more but doesn't have enough influence while China pays less. But if you read just the stats on Wikipedia in 2021, the United States contributed 9.7% of the WHO's operational budget, which amounts to about 800 million, I found out through various news articles and threads on Reddit. Meanwhile, Germany contributed 14.4% of the WHO's full operational budget. And for context, China provided 2.5% of the budget, right? So yes, the United States was paying more, but if you put the influence over the organization aside, the value of the WHO is in data sharing, right? You have basically this giant repository of information that researchers around the world can contribute to. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, China sequenced the COVID-19 virus, shared that information with the World Health Organization, and then the rest of the world was able to start acting on it, right? So leaving the World Health Organization cuts off American researchers from all that resource. So it's really a dumb policy that just makes it a lot harder for American researchers to get that information easily, and it also makes the overall health system weaker. The other part of it, go ahead.
And not to cut you off, but he's also defunding NIH, which on top of that,
yeah,
sounds like they're pretty screwed. I hope they don't have another pandemic like bird flu.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that so not having access to all that information not only weakens the American health system, it weakens the global health system too, right? Because now America doesn't have any of those connections to all this data and all this research from around the world. And a lot of times experts come out of the United States. They have some of the best schools in the world. And the reason why we have so many smart people in the United States is because of that system, right? So all of a sudden now the global health system has just basically been dropped down a few pegs because Donald Trump thinks that basically, even though America was already basically dictating the global health system, they weren't dictating it enough, right? And on the influence peddling side of the argument, well, now America has no voice while China has a bigger voice, right? So you're trying to say that oh, we don't have enough influence, so we're going to give up all of our influence and then give all of that to other people, right? So it's just really stupid policy.
Did you find anything that talked about and I only asked this because there was some stuff about the Paris climate stuff. Is it the WHO, because I know it's an organization, but are there any stipulations around the leave process? So do they have to give, say, 1 year notice, or pay their fees from that year and then they leave? Or is it just you give your notice and then it's 60 days?
So from what
I can put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's fine. So from what I can tell, and this is just very quick, not thorough research. I didn't read the Constitution with the WHO at all, but it's primarily funded by contributions. Yeah, I know, not doing enough, right? But it is financed by contributions, right? So you don't have to pay a certain amount and you're a member, great. It's your membership's kind of tied to your membership within the UN, more or less. Most countries in the UN are part of the WHO.
Right.
and then you contribute to the WHO kind of based on, whatever you feel like is from what I can tell. I mean, maybe I can read it more, but it is based on contributions. So there's nothing like specifically tying you to continue to give money to the WHO. And the other thing too is that I'm not sure if you saw this, but after he signed that executive order earlier this week, WHO announced that they're freezing all hiring. Like basically, unless they need something, they're not doing anything
Yeah, I
else.
did see that.
You need a new computer. Is it not totally necessary? Great, continue using your crappy old laptop, right?
Yeah, which says that it's like, it's more of an instant, like, we're out type thing.
Yeah.
That's interesting because the Paris Climate Agreement, great segue, looks like it's going to wind up in legislation because to leave the Paris Accords, you have to give 1 year notice and you have to pay your dues that year. Whereas Trump just sent them a letter that said, we're out, we're done, go away. Yeah. So I'll be watching that one to see what happens with it. But I suspect it's not over and it's going to end up probably in the international court.
It's going to be a long fight, right? But that seems to be a theme. Seems to be a theme in American politics. So
I don't want to talk about this next one. I'm so exhausted already.
I know, but
January 6th releases. I don't know if there's. So people are acting like they're surprised that Trump has done this. Let's watch a video from Hannity where Trump talks about this, and pay particular attention to the part where he says it's very cumbersome was his exact words, to go through 1,500 files. So to me that says, I didn't look at it, I just said, F it, just pardon them all. So let's take a look.
So you did run on a platform. You were very straightforward. You said you would pardon these people that were sentenced for January 6th.
Yeah, totally.
You did. The only criticism or pushback I've seen is about people that were convicted or were involved in incidents where they were violent with police. Why did they get a pardon?
A number of reasons. Number one, they were in there for 3.5 years, a long time.
Right.
And in many solitary confinement, treated like nobody's ever been treated. It's treated so badly. They were treated like the worst criminals in history. And you know what they were there for? They were protesting the vote because they knew the election was rigged and they were protesting the vote. And that you should be allowed to protest the vote. You should be allowed to. You know, when the day comes.
But you shouldn't be able to invade the Capitol.
No, ready? Most of the people were absolutely innocent. Okay, but forgetting all about that, these people have served horribly a long time. It would be very, very cumbersome to go and look. You know how many people we're talking about? 1,500 people. Almost all of them should not have been. This should not have happened. And the other thing is this: some of those people with the police, true, but they were very minor incidents. Okay, you know they get built up by that a couple of fake guys that are on CNN all the time.
Nobody watches.
They were very minor incidents, and it was time. You have murderers in Philadelphia. You have murderers in Los Angeles that don't even get any time. They don't even collect them, and they know they're there to be collected. And then they go on television and act holier than thou about this one or that one. You had 1,500 people that suffered. That's a lot of people. You know, they were looking for new people 2 weeks ago. They were looking, wait a minute, they were looking to charge new people. They have a woman who's 76 years old that they said made a statement that was a little bit out of line years after the fact. This was a political hoax. And you know what? Those people, and I'm not saying in every single case, but there was a lot of patriotism with those people, a lot of patriotism. You know, they did a recording, and you know, they asked me if I'd do the voiceover, and I did. Yeah. Do you know it was the #1 selling whatever you call it nowadays, album, whatever, song,
CD?
whatever you call it. You don't know, it changes every year, right? But it was the #1 selling song, #1 on Billboard, #1 on everything for so long. People get it. They wanted to see those people.
American people were aware. You told them what you would do. Joe
Well, they
Biden,
voted for
Joe
me.
Biden said he would not do it. Let me move on to the economy.
Okay, Rio. Thoughts, feelings,
Yeah.
comments.
Like,
They were treated so badly, though. Those poor insurrectionists
yeah,
that
those poor
murdered
people.
cops.
Yeah, that went into the Capitol with guns, shouting "Hang Mike Pence," and like specifically aiming to kill Nancy Pelosi. Right? Like, these aren't the good people Donald Trump says they are. Right? And you and I were actually talking about this before we hopped on this recording, but like after the pardons came through, one of them got out, and then a few days later was arrested on weapons charges.
Not even a few days, less than 24 hours. It was
there you go.
Less than 24 hours. Yeah, on weapons charges.
There you go.
Weapons charges.
So like these aren't good people, right?
No. And to show you they're not good people, let's talk about who got pardoned a little bit.
Yep.
Enrique Tarrio, who is the former leader of the Proud Boys, he was serving a 22-year sentence for actual insurrection. So he was charged and convicted on sedition, which, for those of you that don't know, sedition is a charge of trying to take over the government. He was literally put in jail for 22 years for insurrection. But the best part about this, and Rio, I don't know if you knew this, he wasn't there that day. He was actually banned from Washington 3 days prior on weapons charges and told not to come. So they managed to be able to convict him for planning the insurrection, and he wasn't even there.
Yeah.
So there's that lovely guy. And then there's Stuart Rhodes, who was the Oath Keeper founder, who also was charged and convicted of sedition. He stashed weapons in hotel rooms across the river in Virginia for this lovely event.
Yep.
He apparently didn't physically enter the Capitol. He was outside directing people what to do. So yeah, he got 18 years. There was another person who I actually forgot to write him down. Another founder, he also got 18 years and was also charged and convicted of sedition.
Yeah,
that's great. Isaac Sturgeon was also released, and you might know him from assaulting police officers.
I remember that video.
Yeah, he was convicted in 2023 and sentenced to 6 years in prison and found guilty on multiple felonies. In particular, he was the guy that was trying to hit police officers with a bike rack. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
And then there was, who else do we have here that's a piece of work? Oh, Jacob Chansley. Do we remember him? The shaman with the painted American flags on his face and shit. Yeah, he was released, and he posted to X right after he got to a phone. Now I'm gonna buy some mother effing guns.
Yep. Again, just violent sentiment that's becoming normalized in American culture, right?
What could go wrong? What could go wrong?
Yeah.
Richard Bennett was released. He was the one that was in Nancy Pelosi's office taking photographs.
Yep.
Yeah, so just like some of the grossest people, Timothy Kuzzolini, I'm not sure, I probably didn't say that right. But he's another person that was released, and he was well known for his anti-Semitic videos online. So
yeah,
why not? Why not throw some of them in the mix? Not only that, so this story actually got more interesting. More insane. The next morning, as I was actually recording a rant about this, Musk tweeted that if any rioters were having difficulty getting out of prison, they were to let him know. Then it appeared, CNN started reporting that Musk dispatched a man named Christopher Stanley, who works for him, to a jail to ensure the release of the Valentine brothers. This seemed to be corroborated when Stanley tweeted out that that was successful. I don't have the exact tweet with me, but it was something to the effect of boots on the ground to ensure the release of the Valentine brothers was successful. So Musk sent an actual goon to a jail.
Yeah. Like what we were talking about earlier with like oligarchy turning into a mafia. That's literally it, right? Like that's a pretty clear example of like, yep, I'm going to send my enforcer to do his little thing, and here we are.
Well,
So,
and then, I don't know if you saw this, after Stanley tweeted that, Musk replied with a heart emoji.
oh yeah, I saw that. Yep.
So,
yeah, this guy is just a piece of work.
it's absolutely insane. And I don't understand how, I don't want to say that I don't understand how Americans aren't rioting right now, but also I kind of don't understand how Americans aren't rioting, other than the fact that Trump would probably
shoot them all in the leg.
shoot them all. Yeah.
Like his now Secretary of, what was it? It wasn't Secretary of State, Secretary of
State, isn't it? Oh, Hegseth is Secretary of Defense?
Yeah, Secretary of Defense. So like this is the same, when asked like, well, Donald Trump said you should shoot him in the leg, but the other guy refused the order. And Hegseth was like, well, I'm not going to commit to basically he wasn't going to commit to answering whether or not he'd follow an illegal order or not. And also in the same confirmation hearing, like they asked questions like, well, what about following the orders to invade allies? Da, 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 da. And he never said that he never explicitly said he won't follow an illegal order, right?
Which, as we'll see, is really interesting later, because part of his immigration EOs was enacting the Insurrection Act, which allows the military to be used against American citizens. But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So on all of that note, what's really hilarious is the executive order he signed on not weaponizing the government.
Yeah, this is like hot meat kettle, right? But the whole purpose of this executive order is to try and curb what the administration views as misuse of federal institutions for political purposes. And like ostensibly is to try and rebuild trust by making sure that governments are nonpartisan. But on the other side of things, you also had another executive order that basically made a whole bunch of positions within government direct appointees of the president, right? So how can you have a nonpartisan regime really not weaponized, even though you say you're trying to not weaponize the government, right? So I just got to refer to my notes here real quick. But after this one, so after he signed this one, the weaponization of government EO, there's another executive order prohibiting federal officers, employees, or agents from unconstitutionally abridging free speech of any American citizen, which supposedly was supposed to focus on reinforcing the First Amendment protections and make sure that people don't engage in censorship. But the Constitution already guarantees freedom of speech, so it kind of is highlighting like concerns over alleged suppression in digital and public spheres. So I don't know what he's actually trying to accomplish, but it's just insane to me that like, he's saying like, oh yeah, we're not going to weaponize the government, but he's effectively now weaponized the government too, right? Like,
well, I mean, he appointed Kash Patel, who wrote a hit list in his book of political opponents that needed to be punished.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And then what? So now, and on top of that, we now have a bunch of people who suddenly don't have security protections based on like, actual intelligence threat assessments, both domestic and foreign, right? So you're weaponizing the government in the same sentence. You're saying, oh yeah, no more weaponization of the government.
Yeah, this is kind of
hot meat kettle.
Yeah, this is kind of just as stupid as that EO he signed, which isn't in the list, but he also signed an EO directing government employees to do everything they can to bring down costs. And it was just like, thanks, Tip.
Yeah.
Like,
Thanks for telling them to do their job, I guess.
right? Like, it's insane. He also started his crackdown on immigration like immediately, which isn't a surprise, but there were kind of some surprises within that. Like actually, when you think about it, this isn't that surprising. He designated drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations,
Yeah.
which at its core, like, you wouldn't think, like, you're just like, whatever, they are. Like, they kind of are. They don't really meet the definition, but yeah, okay. But then you actually start to think about what that designation means, right? So, like, yeah, there's like tougher penalties, but it also means that the US can do possible military action on Mexican soil.
Yeah. And like, look how well that went in Afghanistan and Iraq, right?
And that's the thing, right? That's what other people have also been talking about, is like, again, like, to go back to Pod Save America, they were talking about how, like, you look at what happened in Afghanistan, is that just going to be happening now on the other side of, like, the border from California?
Yep.
Like, is this what Americans need to wake up? It's not going to be good for Mexico if Trump suddenly starts deciding he's going to, like, try to drone strike some cartel operation in Mexico and hits the wrong target or something.
Yep.
So there's that lovely piece of news. More imperialist actions from Trump. He declared an emergency at the southern border to mobilize additional Pentagon resources and armed forces to complete the southern border wall. Which is interesting because
he failed the first time.
Well, he failed the first time, but like, it's because he couldn't secure the funds. And what he's done is he's invoked the Insurrection Act at the southern border. So now he doesn't have to worry about that. He's basically, so the Insurrection Act means he can use military force against American citizens, like domestically, and he can step around Congress and effectively doesn't need him. So what he said about enacting this is, America's sovereignty is under attack. This assault on American people and the integrity of American sovereign borders represents a grave threat to our nation. I don't believe he was that clear. Because of the gravity and emergency of this present danger and imminent threat, it is necessary for the armed forces to take all appropriate action to assist the Department of Homeland Security in obtaining full operational control of the southern border. So it's important to remember, like I said, the Insurrection Act authorizes him to deploy military forces inside the United States.
Yeah, without any sort of
yeah, and it authorizes him to suppress rebellion or domestic violence or enforce laws, which, like, is really ironic that he's going to use the Insurrection Act at the border to suppress domestic rebellions, potentially, but that's a whole other thing. Yeah, so the statute, like, I looked into it, and it basically implements Congress's authority under the Constitution to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union. So they don't mince words there. Yeah. Basically, it's to oversee the act in the US that says that you can't use military force on Americans and within the borders. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Then he rescinded the task force to reunite separated families. I don't think this needs much commentary. We saw what he did at the border with his camps and separating children from families the first time around. So why wouldn't he do it the second time? So look forward to that depression. And then there was the birthright citizenship stuff. So this was signed where all future children born of people that aren't American citizens or have green cards or something wouldn't get their birthright citizenship. This was immediately challenged in court by
Yeah.
like no fewer than 8 organizations. There's also over 12 U.S. or not U.S. senators, U.S. Attorney generals that also have challenged this in court. And then on Thursday, it was struck down as what the judge said blatantly unconstitutional. And it's now going to work its way through the appeals court. This one, nobody seems to think is going to stick. Their 14th Amendment is pretty clear here. If you are a baby born on American soil, regardless of the situation, you are an American citizen.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. Screw Trump. He's a horrible person.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, well, to kind of all of that, like, and again, this is just kind of building on what we were talking about earlier with like the rise of fascism. All of a sudden, being able to use the military on your own citizens, like that should be a huge red flag to anyone, right? But I can't believe that we actually have people that are like, "Yep, great," not realizing the deeper implication here is that like it's not just at the border, you know that, right? Like it's not that it's there now, but like it's one step away from like, what if there's a riot in LA, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, and history shows us, right? Like we know what appeasing dictators does.
yeah, like we know what it does, and then it just leads to worse situations, right? You go back to World War II, and you can see the worst example of it in human history. So
Yeah.
it's crazy to me that we're like, yeah, fascism is back. This is totally fine, and not enough people are like, no, this is a problem. We have to be ready for this, right?
It's very depressing.
Yeah, it's sad that this is the state of the world we're in, right?
And we get to live next door to it. Yay.
Cool. Yeah, I can't wait for Pierre Poilievre to start doing the same thing here in Canada.
That's a whole other conversation.
Yep.
Doge, Department of Government Efficiency.
Which I just want to quickly comment is really stupid that they named it as like after the really dumb cryptocurrency. Like, how blatant could you be about how fucking stupid and corrupt you are?
Well, what's really funny about this is, so first it was supposed to be Musk and this other guy running it, whose name escapes me at the moment. But they ran him out, and he's now going to run for governor of Florida because he was like, screw this, I'm gone. So now it's just Musk. But what was interesting is there's 2 lawsuits filed against this under the Advisory Committee Act because initially Trump said this was going to be like an advisory role where they were going to look at like where could they create government efficiencies. But of course, like the big thing with this is under the their Advisory Act, transparency is a big thing. Like they're subject to their FOIP, freedom of information. They have to be transparent. They have to have like certain membership. Yeah. So the problem is that when Trump signed the order, it turned out what the order actually said was that this was going to be a governmental body.
Yeah.
So he's trying to use an executive order to sidestep Congress's role in creating new government departments,
yeah.
Which is quite interesting. And in turn, this actually makes those lawsuits irrelevant. So they'll probably get dismissed and have to come back as violating government department rules and regulations. So who knows how long that'll take. I suspect not too long. But you can't just like in the US, you can't just create a whole department by executive order. Like there are limitations to what executive orders can do. They can't break laws and they can't go against the Constitution. So there's that, but we all know Trump doesn't give a crap about that. So
yeah, he seems to be very on board with just like signing stuff that seems to benefit him right off the gate, right?
Yeah.
So like I think there's a lot to be said about the fact that he's just trying this is actually something else we should talk about too, is like he's deliberately trying to sidestep all of these things that are already in place to prevent abuse of power by the president and just trying to normalize like, yep, abuse of power by the president, right? At least to me, that's what it's coming across as.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, abuse of power by Trump, shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So